Good morning and welcome to the Coaches Show brought to you by BCE TV. I'm Lane Johnson. We're in week 13. We're joined here by Lincoln's head coach, Brad Drehle. Coach, congratulations on a district title.
Thank you.
Your first year at Lincoln. Let's talk about briefly what we're going to see this week. The Lincoln Cardinals 11-1, ranked 6th in the state. Not sure if that's changed or not, but we'll travel to Monroe City and take on the number 1 team in the state, who are 12-0. Before we get to that game, we're going to recap what we saw last week in week 12. Lincoln with a 38-20 win over conference rival Colcamp for the second victory over them this season. And Coach, let's just get right into it. Last week against Colcamp, the opening drive came up scoreless for the first time in a few weeks. However, it ended with a great punt from Cardinal to pin them at their own 1-yard line. A couple plays later, Darren Roberts cut under a sheer pass, came up with a turnover to give your offense the ball in plus territory. This time around, your offense would not be denied. Cardinal rumbled around the left side for about a 7-yard score. Talk us through those first couple of possessions, offensively and defensively, and then what adjustments Colcamp made from the first matchup to the second one.
You know, as far as their adjustments, they tried to change things in the secondary a little bit. We got a little more quarters coverage than true cover 2, which means they were bailing on us a little bit. And then, you know, formation-wise, we got a couple of different formations, but you know, we were able to get back into last year's tape, and it kind of mirrored what they'd done the year before in our second matchup, and our kids were a little more prepared for it this time. Felt like we came out and our kids were fired up and ready to go. They played with a lot of emotion, a lot of energy. That's something we're going to have to carry forward this week also. But you know, in a rivalry game, in a big game like that, in district championship, both teams are going to make plays, and you know, we pin them on the 1-yard line, then Shear breaks a 20-yard run on quarterback sneak. First play. So, but we were able to right the ship, and our kids just stayed. You know, they stayed with the process. They stayed with the game plan, and you know, we were able to get them into a passing situation, and then Darren was able to undercut the pass to get an interception, to get us started, and that kind of got us going.
Then that next drive was when we saw Harrison go down. I believe their next possession. Unfortunate to see that happen in a game between teams like this. With that being said, you stopped them on 4th down on that drive. Steenbergen took it around the right side. Defense came up strong. They were into Lincoln territory. And then at that point, things, obviously, you know, you had a rushing touchdown on your first drive with Connor, and things picked right back up for your rushing attack. From that point on, Johnson and then the Red Line, as you've dubbed it, on a historic night, rumbled for 2 more touchdowns in the opening half. Johnson became Lincoln's all-time leading rusher. He surpassed Derek Stevens and pushed his own tally to 3,336 yards. What can you say about this offensive line and how they've grown? You've got a lot of 3-year starters there, and then also how Johnson has improved at running behind them.
You know, it's just a growing process through any season, and we've been able to this year, because of their experience, to add some things that we may not have had in a year ago, and it has allowed us to, you know, to expand our offense a little bit. And then all these kids are, you know, they're battle tested. They've been playing for 3 years. They've been playing together for 3 years, and they're a focused group, and you know, you can see it with the way they get off the ball, and I think Ross has got a bunch of confidence running behind them and does a good job following the blocks. And you know, I really feel like those kids are kind of coming into their own. I'm not sure that we've seen the best of them yet. Yeah,
well, and their physicality, I think, has improved tremendously even in this season. You know,
it has. I mean, from beginning to end of the year, we've grown. They've grown as individuals. They've grown as a group. I think they're gaining confidence each week that we go out and we're able to do things. And you know, our schedule is, we've had to play some very physical football teams. You know, Windsor was very physical at the line of scrimmage, and obviously Adrian, who's still alive, is very physical at the line of scrimmage, and Colcamp's very physical. So, you know, I think our kids are battle tested, and we're excited for the next challenge.
Okay, so and the last point I'd like to make about that, you know, is I think back to that Branson camp that you guys played before the season, and then what I saw last Friday night, and just really impressed by the growth of specifically of that unit. I think they've done a tremendous job in the game. Johnson led the team, 26 attempts, 186 yards with 4 scores. We can't forget about Connor and Kyle's contribution to the run game. You know, the 3 went for over 300 yards combined, which any night you do that, you're putting yourself in a position to win a football game. Connor, 13 for 108 with a score, and then Kyle added 6 for 22. Obviously, the rushing attack has come along, but we got to talk about the passing attack that's helped open that up. Connor has become a very great runner in his own right, but then the weapons that you have in the passing game, the stats for the passing attack last week weren't gaudy, but you came up with big catches and big pass plays when you needed them to help sustain drives. I look back to the first half. The total passing attack totaled 91 yards on 5 for 9. But Darren in the first half had 2 huge catches. One, a tremendous catch along the sideline that extended drives. And then in the second half, Caleb Mundy and Kyle Eckhoff both chipped in with a huge reception each. Caleb's was kind of a quick bubble screen that turned into 22 yards. Tremendous block by Darren.
Yep.
And a good job setting that up Mundy. That puts you at the 1 yard line. I think you punched it in a couple of plays later. And then on probably your longest third down attempt of the game, you had a 3rd and 25, I believe. Was that in the fourth quarter when you hit Kyle on that?
Kyle for the screen, yeah.
Yeah, Kyle had you've talked about it off the air. You've kind of hinted at it, and that was the first time you'd really thrown it in all year. It hit huge, great execution. Kyle turned it into 23 yards on that 3rd, and I think it was 24 or 25. And then that set up a manageable 4th down attempt, which you converted and then kept that drive alive. I believe you scored points on that drive. So passing attack definitely opened things up for you. Will you talk to us about that passing attack and things that you talk about? You saw quarters coverage. Did that fly in the face of things you thought you could exploit going in?
No, the things were there. We missed a couple. We had an opportunity for 2 other big plays and just missed them. This time of year, you kind of go with what's working.
Yeah.
And once we established that we could run the ball, and we were able to sustain drives and keep the chain moving by running the football on a cold night. We kept running the football, and it's that time of year. If we are not able to do that, then we feel like we have the ability to step out there and throw it a little bit. And when you spread the field and you still have to deal with Connor, the opportunity for him to run, for a defense, that's a stressor. And it may be that this week we're going to have to throw it a little bit more, but.
Right.
Each week we go in with the idea that we have got a game plan to throw it and run it, and if we can run it, we're going to run it. If we can't, then we feel confident that Darren and Caleb and Kyle and Mac and whoever else we put in there is going to make catches and make plays for us. And we feel like our offensive line will keep Connor clean, and Connor's proven more than adequate as a passer.
Well, I couldn't agree more. From our vantage point up in the booth, we've developed a lot of trust for your passing attack too. I mean, what they did against Adrian and how each game they seem to come up with timely plays when it's needed to maybe a penalty sets you back or the rushing attack doesn't hit on 1st and 2nd down. It seems like they come up clutch in a lot of ways. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, you had some great contributions all over the place this week. Camden Everhart and Ross Johnson each led the team 15 tackles apiece. Kyle was not very far behind him. He had 14 of his own. Connor and Riley each had 7 tackles. Darren had 6 tackles to go with his pair of interceptions. Moving down to the line, Jacob Plum and Eli Tolliver each had 5 tackles. And it's really been a team effort lately for the defense. You can tell they're getting into the film room, they're reading their keys, and they're seeing things differently, I think, than they did early in the season.
And they're trusting each other. They trust the process. Our defensive line can get frustrated because they don't get a lot of stats, but what they do creates opportunities for the others to get stats. And right now, that's the fun thing about it. Nobody's asking about stats. Nobody wants to know. They just looking at the scoreboard, and if we win, we're moving on for the next one. And that's what makes this game fun.
And you'll need that this week.
Absolutely.
So, any big takeaways from the defensive performance of your team? I know.
The thing about it is I think as the year has gone on, those kids have gained confidence. I think the thing that you probably saw last week and what I noticed most was just the physical play.
Yeah.
When kids broke runs, they didn't just get drugged to the ground, they got hit. And on a cold night and a long night, you're going to have to play 48 minutes. Those things add up. They become cumulative in their effect, and especially if you're able to run with power on the offensive side.
Right, which you did. Okay, let's go ahead and take a commercial break, and we'll come back and talk about some season stats.
Are you missing that human touch with your bank? Come talk to a real person at Community National Bank and Trust. We're your local bank that's small enough to know you, yet big enough to offer the best products. Stop by and see us at 101 South 65 Highway in Lincoln or 1695 Hilltop Drive in Warsaw. Your community, your bank, your relationship. Community National Bank and Trust. Federally insured, locally awesome. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Okay, Coach, we touched on many of the in-game statistics from last week's matchup with Cole Camp. We're going to move on and talk about some team stats that they've compiled through 12 games this season. Starting on the offensive side, and part of the reason, I know you and I are both hoping that that you're going to fill up that all-district team. We know you're going to fill up the all-conference team. So just want to show off some of the kids. You know, your rushing attack as a whole has almost 3,200 yards, and that's pretty impressive. Obviously, Johnson setting the career record. He's got 1664. He and Connor have combined for almost 2,400 yards and 40 touchdowns, with Connor pitching in 750 yards and 13 touchdowns. Kyle Eckhoff not far behind with 300 of his own with 2 scores, and then Anthony Schrader also over the 200 mark. He's got a touchdown. Moving on to the passing game to go along with Connor's 750 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's filled it up on the passing game too. He's got over 1,500 yards now, 12 scores to only 3 interceptions. He's doing a great job. His favorite target seems to be the combination of Mundy and Roberts. Roberts with 28 catches, nearly 700 yards. He's got 7 scores. And then Caleb Mundy, so effective in that quick game that you guys like to do. And I think a big part of that is that you see teams load the box, but then Darren and your receivers as a whole, you spread Kyle and Mac out there sometimes, they all block for each other.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot. So Mundy, 37 catches, he's got over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kyle Eckhoff, to go with his 300 rushing yards, he's got 370 receiving and 2 scores. Mac Hesse, who I want to ask you about in a second, he's got 180 yards with 2 touchdowns. Moving to the defensive side, Johnson leading the team. He's up to 115 tackles. He's got 7 sacks and 6 tackle for losses. Camden Everhart, I rave about him all the time on the broadcast. I love watching him play. 87 tackles, 9 sacks, and 12 tackle for losses. Kyle Eckhoff really putting in work from that free safety position. He's got 96 tackles with a sack, 3 tackle for losses, and an interception. And then, your defensive backfield, they do a good job of coming up and tackling. I don't know that every team has the luxury of their corners sticking their nose in and making good form tackles. Riley Sanders, he plays safety for you, but as a freshman playing safety, he's got 65 tackles with 5 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. He's also got a sack and 3 tackle for losses. Caleb Mundy, 28 tackles, he's got 3 interceptions. Going down Connor Line, 48 tackles with the impressive 9 tackle for losses. A lot of those, we saw him move around your formation last week. You played him an outside linebacker in lieu of Mac. But a lot of those tackle for losses have come from his safety position,
spot, yeah.
which is, a testament to the way he plays. He's got 3 picks. I want to get Darren in here as well. He's got 3 interceptions to go with 37 tackles, and he's got 5 pass breakups. Along that defensive line, Jacob Plum, 45 tackles. He's got a sack, 3 tackle for losses. Ashton Wolf, the freshman, 42 tackles with 3 tackle for losses. Ben Eckhoff has gotten in there. He's got 27 tackles. Eli Tolliver played well last week at defensive end for you. He had 37 tackles. He's got 37 tackles on the season with 2 sacks, 2 tackle for losses. And then Christian White, the one that I think doesn't get his name called, but is a huge part of what you guys like to do. He's got 20 tackles, 8 tackle for losses, and a sack. So really good performance on both sides of the ball this year for you. So before we go to break and ultimately talk about Monroe City, I've got to ask you about Mac. He got hurt in that South Callaway game in the 3rd quarter. He dislocated his kneecap. Everybody held their breath and not sure what it was. It later found out it wasn't as serious. And obviously, I'm sure he was ate up watching the game last week. What's going on there?
He practiced yesterday, looked pretty good. He's moving pretty well. We're tentatively have a plan of, obviously putting him back in there, and he's a senior, and if he wants to play and can do it and do it safely, then he'll get that opportunity. He's a tremendous competitor. He's one of our captains, one of our leaders, so he adds a lot to us when he gets out on the field. And for his sake, I hope that he's able to play. For our sake too, but the last thing you want to do as a coach is put a kid in a position where he can injure himself long term. And the doctors have cleared him, and if he's good and his parents are good, we're going to give him a shot.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that he's poised to come back. I think obviously from a football perspective, he helps. He's a two-way starter. He's been a target of Connor's, and he helps tremendously in the run game with the way he blocks, and then the way he defends the run.
Yeah.
I think maybe the understated part of it may be the shot in the arm that it gives everybody else to see him come back and see him get out there and play with those guys. So let's go ahead and take a break. We'll be right back, and we'll start talking about the Monroe City Panthers.
Veracruz Trace Mexican Restaurant in Lincoln, Missouri is proud to support Lincoln and Warsaw High School football. The friendly staff at Veracruz serves delicious and authentic Mexican cuisine Sunday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday through Saturday from 11 to 10. Try it for yourself at 455 North Highway 65 or call it in at 660-547-0315.
Okay, here's what we can expect from the Monroe City Panthers. I want to start with the outcome of last week's game in their district championship. They played South Shelby, defeated them 52-18. I believe that's a conference opponent for them as well, as they played earlier in the season. Let's start on the offensive side. I want to get right into the personnel for them on their offense. Key players that are showing up immediately on film. Number 24, Keaton Pennewell. He plays fullback for them on offense. We'll talk about his defense in a minute. Number 21, Waylon DeGrave, is also a very good football player. He seems to tote the rock quite a bit for them. He's going to play running back and wing back. I mean, they don't split him.
He was All-State as a receiver a year ago, had 1,000 yards receiving, so he's a tremendous athlete.
He is an athlete, you can tell, and good at track from what I understand. So he'll play, and then on defense he'll play as well. Pennewell, obviously last year was the Class 1 Defensive Player of the Year and seems to be a very good player on offense. He's kind of their battering ram as they get around the goal line. You know,
he's their leader. I mean, he's their heart and soul. I mean, you can tell they rally around him in everything that they do, and why not? I mean, he's a tremendous football player, and everything that you can find out there about him. He's a good student. He's a good weight room kid. He's all the things that you'd want.
Yeah, you can tell that on the film too. So in addition to those two, let's talk just about their offensive personnel a little bit. Number 12 is going to play quarterback. He's going to hand the ball off a lot, but he is going to keep it, and I've seen them throw it a little bit off.
Yeah. And they'll throw it off a waggle and play action stuff in their wing tee set. 7 and plays the other wing, the other running back. All three of those kids have had tremendous years. I'm pretty sure that 24 and 21 are both over 1,000. I think 7's real close, and then you add in the tight end, 6 and 2. Both those kids play tight end, and then number 1 is a receiver. They've got some weapons. They've got some really good athletes, and from a defensive standpoint, you got to read your keys, but you have to have great eye discipline because they lull you to sleep, and then all of a sudden they throw the ball over the top of your head, and that's the scary part when you face somebody that runs it so well. And
I think they got Macon on that a couple of times on film, so that's showing up too. It seems like number 1 maybe
the vertical threat.
He's a lot of times the only receiver on the field, but like you said, 21 is a receiver too, and they'll throw it to him out of the backfield. They'll get him down the field. You spoke about number 7. He seems to be fast. Of the 3, physically, he's the smallest, but he's not small.
He's kind of a scat back. I mean, the other two are, 21 is extremely fast, but 24 is not going to make anybody miss, and I don't think he has any intention to make you miss. He's looking to run over you, but 7 will shake a little bit, and he'll bounce it outside and go. He's all of those guys have got runs of 60 and 70 yards, it seems like every time you turn the film on.
Right, and then number 6 and number 2 you mentioned will play tight end. I haven't seen them throw the ball to them a lot. It seems like they stay in there and block most of the time. And not huge kids, but you can tell they're athletes and that they move well. One thing I don't have a lot on is their offensive line. What can you tell us? I have their all-conference selections, and we can run through that. But
the thing about them is, I think they're an experienced group. Most of those kids played a year ago. They're physical. The 2 tackles are big kids. I think 245 and 260. Their guards run really well. In a wing tee set, you want kids that can move so that you can pull and kick out, and then you've got to have a second one that is the wrap so that he can get up inside. He's a guy that's going to the second level defenders, linebackers, and safeties, and they do that really well with 50 and 57, and they're kind of interchangeable. They also flip over on the other side of the defense and their defensive end. So they're physical kids. They like contact, and they're not afraid to mix it up. And like I said, those 2 big old tackles will do a great job on the down block. Their center is a good football player. When you talk to coaches in that area and in their conference, they talk about them being the best offensive line in the state of Missouri. So, their stats and their numbers and their records show it. They've been everybody's preseason pick to win it, and they've been wire to wire number 1 at this point.
And will be definitely a challenge for your red line on both sides. Talking about number 57, he's a first-team all-conference player. So is, I think 54 is their center.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's a first-teamer. And then they've got 65 listed as a second-team all-conference lineman. So they love to run the ball. It looks like 90+% run. You mentioned wing tee. I see buck sweep on there. I see
power. You see trap.
Reverse,
you see dive. They run ISO. They'll run a double ISO lead play they'll move 58 in the backfield. They're their defensive tackle with him and 24. I mean, you got 215 and 210 lead blocking for number 21. You know,
Right.
it's a load, and
Yeah.
you got to have a good run fit so that you can deal with that. They run dive and then ISO behind it, so they'll dive, Pinwell 24 into the line of scrimmage and then into A gap and then into C gap. They'll run an ISO play behind it. Those are all things that are tough to deal with. They're unique to their system, and it's not something that you see often. So all those things force your kids to be correct in the run fits, and it's difficult to run fit that stuff. So it's going to be a challenge, but at this time of year, I think our kids are up for it.
I do too. I'm excited to get out and see it. I have here they pride themselves on physicality. You touched on that. They've been.
Their mantra, I think, up there is, and I've seen it or read it, I don't know, half dozen times or more by now, is that they want to create a new line of scrimmage, and their kids do a good job of getting off the ball very fast. They're going to break the huddle. They're going to get to the line of scrimmage, and within 2 or 3 seconds of getting to the line of scrimmage, about 5 seconds out of the huddle, the ball is snapped. And so we've got to be ready to go at all times. I mean, they've got to get our hand on the ground and be ready to play.
It seems to me, you've excuse me, you've touched on some of the keys that your defense is going to play with. You've got to remain gap sound. Your fits have to be right. You're going to have to play and match their physicality. Their offense averages 48 points a game. Do you have any other keys for us that you're going to take in to trying to stifle that attack?
It's just the physical play.
Yeah.
And that's what this time of year is about. It's about 48 minutes of football.
Right.
And both teams are going to have to line up and be able to concentrate and focus both mentally and physically for 48 minutes. It's going to be a war. I mean, it's going to, that's I guess maybe a bad analogy, but it's the best one that we can give, is from the fact that you've got to go in and be willing to stand in there and fight together for 48 minutes. If you take a minute or two off, you're going to get beat.
Yeah, and you mentioned a war, and we hear about a war of attrition all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, that if we'll see how that shakes out. The last kind of, before we move to the their defense, I want to ask you, you talked about how that fake dive and then ISO is a little bit different than anything your kids have seen, but you have seen some run-heavy attacks, like Windsor, Colcamp, Adrian, Tipton ran the ball a lot.
Wellington.
And Wellnap, yeah. Excuse me. How does that compare? I mean, you obviously got to play with the physicality. Some of the keys are different, but some of them carry over. How would you compare the film preparation and then the preparation?
Well, each week the preparation is a little bit different. I mean,
Absolutely.
we've faced some offenses that do some things similar. And when you look at Adrian, you look at Colcamp, they have a mix of the personnel from those two teams. I mean, the Bailey kid over at Adrian is obviously a tremendous player. He and 21 are probably very similar. Mm-hmm. 36 and 24, 36 from Adrian and 24 are probably very similar in the fact that there's no pretense about them doing anything. They're just trying to run over you and hit you. So, from our standpoint, we feel like, we've kind of seen that type of play. Whether we've seen their type of play or not is going to be the key. They're very physical and they're very good at what they do, but everybody is at this time of year.
Yeah.
And so it's about mentally staying focused and staying locked in. You can't get too high and you can't get too low. Obviously you want to celebrate the little things and try to gain energy and mojo and all the things that you want to talk about, but you have to stay focused in the moment.
And like you said a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, you can't focus on more than one thing at a time.
That's correct.
So I'm sure that'll be part of your mentality that you instill in these boys, and they've carried that out thus far.
Yeah.
So excited to see this challenge for them. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we mentioned Pinwell briefly on the other side. At being a junior and being named Class 1 Defensive Player of the Year is a pretty prestigious deal, and then it tracks. You watch film and you can see it. He plays that middle linebacker position. I want to ask you about their defense some, because from what I see, 6 and 21 also play linebacker, but 21 will go out and cover.
12 will roll down in there sometimes too.
Okay.
Those kids will roll in there. They, 4-2-5, 4-4, whatever you want to call it, is kind of their base. When you get into spread stuff, sometimes they'll give you a 5-man box because they are so good in it.
Yeah.
With 24 in there and 58 and 65 managing the defensive tackle spots and 50 and 57 at the defensive ends. They've got a lot of confidence in their front, and when you turn on the film and you watch them, rightfully so. I mean, they've only given up 116 points all year.
Right.
9 points a game. Their average win margin is 48-9. So they flat get after you, and they put so much pressure on you from the offensive side that when you turn over to defense or turn over to your offense, you feel like you've got to go score. Mm-hmm. And because they're playing so fast, they force mistakes. People put the ball on the ground, they throw interceptions, and I don't know how many defensive scores they've got this year, but they've got several.
And that's where staying in that mindset of, you take the punch, but you don't freak out too much. You stay in it and you do what you do. And that's, I'm sure that'll be part of what's being said on the sideline and pregame and during the game. Corners for them, looks like number 1 plays corner, number 3 is going to play some corner. It appears to me they play mostly man.
Yeah.
Is that
They play some quarters, and
Okay.
they'll play a man under 2 deep at times also. It kind of depends on down and distance and what they're wanting to get,
Right.
and how physical they're able to stay in the box. If we can force them, to add 1 more or 2 more guys in the box and run the ball effectively, then the coverage piece begins to shake itself out as far as what they do consistently. But most teams are not able to do that. I mean, they're able to stop the run with 5 and 6 guys, and a lot of times just 5, and they commit those other kids into the pass game. Like you said, 1 and 3 of their corners, they 22, you'll see him in coverage, you'll see 21 in coverage, and 12 sometimes in coverage, but generally it's 1, 23, 20, or 1, 3, 21, 22. Those are their main cover guys.
And like you, they're playing some younger guys in their
Yeah.
secondary. 22, I believe, is a freshman.
Yeah.
Number 3 is a sophomore or a junior, but they're comparable in size. And then the defensive line, I don't have a lot on them. You've mentioned several of their players. As I look at their all-conference selections, 58's along the D-line. He's a first-teamer in their conference. 57, who is also a first-teamer on the offensive line, is a first-teamer at the end. And then 50.
They're physical, and they flat get off the football.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's
they do.
simple as you can put
Yeah.
it. I mean, that's the way it is. Okay. I'm assuming the plan, you're going to stick to what you do and try and execute what your offense does well with the new wrinkles added in. How much, and maybe this is a stupid question, but when you know that they have a defensive player of the year on their team, how does that factor into the game plan? And then what are you telling the kids?
The thing is, just do what we do. At this time of year when you have 2 good football teams, they still have to block and tackle us, and we have to block and tackle them. And it's going to come down to some one-on-one battles. And if their kids are better than us, they're going to beat us. And if we can make plays and we end up being a little bit better than them, then we're going to beat them. They're battle tested. They're ready. Our kids are battle tested and ready. So it should be a great high school football game, and we're excited to have the opportunity to go play it.
And so, do you think their box is the strength of their defense? Obviously, their entire defense
I
is
think
good.
so. I mean, it's all those kids on the outside, but some of those kids, just like any great defense, you benefit from what happens in the box.
Right.
If you're able to put pressure on it, sure make coverage a whole lot easier. If you're going to go out there and cover for 3 or 4 seconds, it makes it a little bit tougher. And those kids up front don't give you much time.
Right.
They get in the backfield and they make things happen.
Do you care to comment about what you think might be exploitable about their defense?
I mean, right now we hope that we can find a way to put some points on the board.
Okay, that's what it's going to take. This time of year, it's win or go home. We talk about, you made a comment earlier. I firmly believe that you're not playing at this time of year by accident, and you just got to go out and play who's in front of you. And each team is trying to earn that extra 48 minutes
That's correct.
that you talk about. This one might be a special opportunity for some of the Lincoln faithful that have been around for a while. Monroe City knocked Lincoln out of the Final Four back in 2016. Monroe's offense and defensive approach seems to be similar. I think they've still got the same coach there that they had those years back. So it's going to be fun to see what happens and who comes out on top. And let's go ahead and break for one more commercial, and then we'll get out of here.
Hi, I'm Luke Beeman with Reese Nichols Golden Key Realty. We're located north of Warsaw on Highway 65. We have 14 real estate agents with 275 combined real estate years of experience. Give us a call at 660-438-7228. Please visit us on our website, reeseandnichols.com.
So in week 13, the Lincoln Cardinals will travel to Monroe City to face the Panthers in a state quarterfinal match. Kickoff is set for 1 p.m. Saturday afternoon. It's going to be a cold one, so if you're able to come and support the Cardinals, dress warm and be loud. If you're not able to attend in person, remember Brett Bryan and I will be live as we are every week, roughly 20 minutes before kickoff. Keep in mind that this week you'll have to purchase our broadcast. You can purchase it through Misha.tv's website. We'll get a link out on social media later, closer to game time. The www.citylinktv.com link should still work. You'll be redirected to pay for the stream through Misha at that site. It's also worth mentioning that the Lincoln Booster Club is sponsoring a tailgate before the game, so be sure to contact Angela Parrott for more details about that. Coach, good luck. I hope to be doing another one of these next week.
That would be fun.
That'd be really fun. Thanks for joining us today. For Lincoln head coach Brad Drehle and Lane Johnson, we'll see you next week.
This has been a BCE TV production. Thank you for watching.